Welcome to my beginner's guide to UEFN and Verse for people who know Fortnite Creative 1.0. Why switch to UEFN? Well, undo. Undo, 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 and undo. But also, UEFN is based upon Unreal Engine, where Fortnite Creative 1.0 was based on Fortnite. So what happens in that switch is you have a bunch of tools. Undo is a sample of the tools that are basic that would be very, very difficult to design, either an interface or an actual like functionally working thing that could be handled by a console on in Fortnite Creative 1.0. So you get a bunch of tools and a bunch of things that simply cannot be done very easily by Epic in Fortnite Creative 1.0. That said, as somebody who understands Fortnite Creative 1.0, you don't need to learn as much as somebody who jumps into UEFN cold. You know how all the devices work. You know how to do quick edits. You can do really cool, like I've seen stuff that I'm amazed by in Fortnite Creative 1.0. And being able to do that kind of editing and doing the design and doing the marketing and having the network, all of those things will be very useful to you in UEFN, but you just need to get the skills and then learn maybe a little code, maybe not. I mean, you might not need to learn much code in the end to be able to work in UEFN. But for now, just getting your feet wet and watching me go through making a simple red versus blue map, and adding some functionality, doing stuff the UEFN way, and seeing where you can take what I know and what I'm trying to teach you and apply little bits and pieces of it, and then just put it into an island and edit it in Creative 1.0 if you like. That would be a good start for anybody when it comes to learning how to use Verse and UEFN. So let's get started on that. I won't keep you waiting with lengthy talks about installing UEFN in Visual Studio. You need Fortnite and Unreal Engine for Fortnite installed. After them, hop over to the Microsoft site, download, and install Visual Studio Code. The link for that is right there in the video description. All right, time to get our hands dirty and open up UEFN. Let's start by creating our very first island. You'll see a collection of templates here. Choose one and put it in a specific folder on your hard drive. I've set mine up for easy access and backup. Quick tip: Epic Games provides source control, but constantly rebuilding your source from it isn't advisable. I've chosen the Arid Island template, but feel free to pick any template that catches your eye. Remember, it's your island. The landscape designer provides a bunch of choices, and your pick won't affect the functionality of your island. To avoid headaches later on, I'd recommend picking an island template without buildings, as they may end up floating around. Now let's do a little exploration. I'm left-handed, so my preferred controls are the arrow keys, mouse wheel, and mouse. Simply click and drag with your mouse to adjust your viewpoint, similar to Fortnite. Use the arrow keys for movement and strafing, and the mouse wheel to control the camera speed. Ready to make your mark on the landscape? First, click on the mode in the upper left. Most of our time will be in selection mode, but for landscape editing, we need landscape mode. Here's where the real fun begins. You can change anything about your landscape. Go on, play around a bit. You can adjust the scale and strength of your tools. The larger and stronger your tool, the more dramatic the impact on your landscape. Want to push things down? Hit Shift with your Sculpt tool. By default, it pushes things up. Personally, I love smoothing and erosion for lowering terrain and the Sculpt tool for elevations. But remember, our biggest goal here is to avoid player frustration. Carefully design your terrain to avoid creating areas where players could get stuck and unable to jump out. Trust me, nothing will make someone quit your map faster. So let's keep things player friendly. But hold up, where are our fortresses going to be? Let's carve out some real estate on opposite ends of the map. We'll start by creating a big flat plate to put things on. Navigate to the little cube icon, go down to shapes, and let's spawn a cube. Now head on over to transform and adjust the scale of this cube to 75 by 75 by 0.25 by entering the numbers directly. That's 75 meters on each side and a quarter meter in height, a sizable footprint to our fortress. Once that's done, we'll use the flatten tool to level the surrounding area and prepare the sites for our fortresses. If you like this video, it would be fantastic if you would drop me a like and subscribe to my channel. That way I can keep making more like it. Sometimes when adjusting the land height, you might give it a little more lift than intended, especially where your fortress will be. No worries, just flatten it out with the handy flatten tool and voila, more space for our big fortress. But watch out for this. See how I made a rookie mistake here? I placed the fortress footprints while they were both rotated. Anything not at a 90-degree angle will throw off your snap settings a bit and give you a real headache if you need to make something square. My advice is to resist the urge to rotate things in odd angles when building in a large square block, unless you enjoy more work. Unfortunately, I had to learn this the hard way and ended up re-landscaping my entire island. Trust me, building with a couple of big rotated foundations doesn't make life easier, but you know, that happens to everyone. And now it's the time for the main event. Building our fortress. The first step was to scour the Fortnite folder in the content browser window for the pieces I wanted to use. A little bit of trial and error, and I discovered a search that displayed most of the wall pieces I wanted to use. It's as simple as dragging and dropping them into the play area, then moving them around. So before we move any deeper, let's chat about movement, rotation, scale, and snap in selection mode. Switching between these options is part of the game, and you'll be doing it quite often. So for movement mode, press Q. Now you can select an object and shift it along 1, 2, or all 3 axes. I recommend moving things on only one axis whenever possible and using the snap for perfect alignment. There's a little icon here in the upper right hand for snap for both movement and rotation. Speaking of rotation, you can hit the E key to go into rotation mode, and the snap, as I mentioned, there's a snap icon up here. And the R key allows you to scale objects. I'd be careful with scaling though, because some devices, most notably the barrier device, don't react well to being scaled. So here's an example of where UEFN shines over Creative 1.0. You can easily copy and paste groups of objects, in this case wall rows, then rearrange them to add uniqueness. If you want uniform walls, just copy a layer from bottom to top and paste it. I've fast forwarded some parts of the build, but you can see how quickly I'm adding wall sections by copying and pasting them. The upper floor and roof are even quicker to assemble because I don't need variation in their graphics. If you're not ready for doing this in UEFN, you can certainly load into Fortnite Creative at this point and edit your project just like you're used to. If you click the Launch Session button at the top middle of the screen, it will launch a session and start playing the game. To get into an edit session, you can simply end game from either UEFN or the Fortnite client, and you should end up with a Fortnite Creative editing session that works exactly how you're used to it working. All right, folks, now we've got your walls built. And let's dive back into the prefabs directory. After a bit of searching, I stumbled on this really nice gate that just looks awesome to fight around. So prefabs are fantastic, just like in Creative 1.0. They fit right in here in UEFN. So there we go. Let's drop that gate in. I took a little detour. I wanted to add some firepower, some tanks, and a battle bus, and some motorcycles for people who want to get to the enemy faster. So all the cool devices you could use in 1.0 are now found under the Fortnite folder in the devices subfolder. This is your one-stop shop for most of the special objects and devices you need. Now let's peek at my folder structure in the outliner in the upper right. See how I've neatly arranged my fortress under a Fortress Blue folder? I added a separate spot for the gates, because they're a prefab, and a main base folder. This folder holds the walls and pretty much everything else inside it. Stay tuned to see how these folders become a lifesaver when we start copying our base for symmetry. Just like in 1.0, I went through the settings for the spawner devices. Now remember, I'm not a Fortnite Creative wizard, so I occasionally stumble into bugs you probably won't. Keep watching for a great example of that coming up. And try not to laugh. All right, on to our next task. We've got our primary fortress down, but we still need some control over the battlefield. Our island is already pretty hard to leave, but let's ensure our players stay inside boundaries we set. To do that, I'm creating a 5-sided barrier around our play space. Just search for barrier in the devices folder, drag and drop it into the editing window, place it strategically, and voila. Remember, you can use the item options to resize, not the transform function like we did with the cube, unless you want to enter a world of confusion. I then copy all those barriers and have 5 of them, 6 of them. Also, clear the material on the barriers so that you can't see them from the island. Now that our barriers are set up, it's time to decorate our island with a few sprinklings of things. Let's put some extra charm around our map. A gas station here, a watchtower there. Remember, always add in pair to maintain some symmetry. Pro tip, to select multiple items, you can hold down Control, Alt, and mouse button to create a selection box, but be careful not to select the landscape inadvertently. As you can see, even I fell into that. So as our fortress came together, it still felt a little, what's the word? Yeah, bland. So we're adding a dash of drama with some side towers. You'll see me copying and dragging the walkway and tower I crafted earlier across the map for that juicy symmetry. Just be mindful during the copy-paste process. I ended up with several duplicates, making our tiles appear shaky. That's a telltale sign that you've got 2 objects cohabitating in the same space. We don't want that for many reasons. Great. Moving forward, we'll add some theatrical flair to our fortress with floodlights and cannons copied and mirrored across our layout. Be attentive to the terrain, ensuring everything is grounded and logical. You may notice a lot of vacant space around. Don't worry about that. We'll revisit this and add more finesse to our design level, gradually filling in these gaps. For now, let's move on. Next, we're introducing an intriguing element, a guard boss. Defeating him will earn players coins they can use to purchase items. Let's get started with that. Within the devices folders, search for guard, then drag the boss into the special area atop the fortress I designed for him earlier. Now the boss comes with many child components, which we won't tweak for the time being. Let's just focus on the base guard spawner for now. Adjust the boss's health and shields, change his model maybe, and set his accuracy to very high. Top it all off with a powerful drum shotgun and make him drop it. This is where we'll integrate a touch of coding. We aim toward coins every time a player eliminates this boss. For this, we need to venture into Verse and Visual Studio Code. Begin by creating a new Verse device and name it the Grant Coin device. As you eagerly anticipate my code outputs, let's take a moment to discuss my approach to programming. Typically, I view any system I build in three parts: input, logic, and output. Here, our system has the player defeating the boss as an input, obtaining the handle for that specific player as logic, and forwarding it to the item granter as output. It's a great fundamental device to construct. So now that we've set the groundwork, let's start implementing our code. First, we'll create a space to import the guard spawner device from the editor. Here we'll use an array, a collection of similar objects, to contain multiple guard spawner devices. That way, we won't need to duplicate our device for each team. Then we'll create a spot for the item granter, which will distribute the coins to the players. Next, we'll write our onBegin function. Notice that UEFN has already populated our device with some elementary debugging prints even before we got started. In my coding practice, I often borrow syntax and functionality from previous code that I or others have written. So our goal here is to trigger an action, similar to a trigger or channel, when a specific input or event happens. This event, in our case, is when a guard is eliminated, so we designate our function as grant coins. To capture the event when a guard is eliminated, we need to listen for it. In a channel-based system, the guard spawner would broadcast an event to the entire channel upon a guard's elimination. But here, instead of tuning into a channel, our device needs to listen directly to the guard spawner. You can think of it as private communication links between this device and the guard spawner, kind of like a Zoom call instead of a live stream. Great. Now that we have our basic groundwork, let's proceed with writing the code for our grant coins function. Before we start, it's important to understand the concept of types. Different types are used in programming to represent and handle different kinds of data. Here are some common types. Integers represent whole numbers. For example, negative 32,767, 0, 1, or 5001. Logics represent Boolean values, which can either be true or false. Floats represent a number with a decimal. Strings represent a sequence of characters, for example, a word or a sentence. Any represents a type that can include any other types. It's also known as a supertype of all other types. Comparable returns a type that can be compared with any other variable of the same type. And void represents an absence of value or type. It is often used as a return type when a method does not return a value. In this context, I've used the term variable. A variable is an element in your code that holds a value of a specific type. A good example in Fortnite Creative would be any device that you have placed. It is essentially a variable of a specific device type. Now back to our grant coins function. Functions in programming are like methods that you would trigger on a device. We generally aim to keep our functions small for better readability and easier debugging. Our grant coins function can be written in two lines. The first line will convert the input, which is a device AI interaction result type, into an agent type. The agent type is essentially the player who eliminated the guard. The second line will pass that agent into the item granter, which will award the player with a number of coins as set up in the item granter. This is what I call my montage of failure. Eliminating the guard returns a variable of type AI interaction result in. That result has attached to it a nullable agent source. We need to convert that nullable agent to an agent for passing to the item granter device grant item function. I did not know how to do this when I originally started recording this video, so I dug for answers. When I was looking for answers, I went to all sorts of places. It helps to be able to search on a single site via Google because Google search is exceptionally good. I also use Discord. I'm in 2 or 3 UEFN Discords, and I just search for a specific problem. Eventually, I asked some questions. After a bunch of searching, I ended up with the code I needed. While waiting for someone to be kind enough to help me, or inspiration, I created an area under the map to hold all my mechanics-related devices. Links to the Discords I used in the Unreal forums are below. Now that we've got the code written for our coin granting device, we need to create an instance of it in our island. To do that, we browse the created devices in the content directory and drag and drop the device into our device area within our island. Once we have the device in the map, we need to set up the variables that are related to the device. In this case, the guard spawner and the item granter, which we pull out of the devices directory and drop right next to it. We also want to set up the item granter to drop gold as the item and the quantity of gold we want dropped per activation or elimination of the boss. Now we add a item granter device into the project from the devices folder and set it to grant gold and as many coins as we want in the quantity. Now we click on the grant coin device and select the coin granter, hit the little plus sign, and select the guard spawner that we want to grant coins on defeat from. And there you go. Your first custom device is set up and ready to go. When the boss is defeated, it should grant the number of coins you've set up to the player who defeated it. This definitely needs some testing, so you should probably run a session for that now. Now we're going to set up a waiting area where everyone gets weapons and spends their money. We want players to be able to see the battlefield from above, so the first step in that is to create a material. A material in Unreal Engine and UEFN is essentially the skin that determines how a 3D object looks in your game. They can include everything from simple color changes to complex simulations of different surfaces like metal, wood, or concrete. We're going to make a very simple material to get you started. To create a material, we first create a directory in the content directory of our project. We want to keep our project as organized as possible so that we can change or reuse pieces more easily. Then we right-click, go to the Create New Asset section, and click on Material. Double-click, and a new window opens up with a node graph in it. We won't deal much with node graphs in this video, but they generally deal on an input linked to an output system. Click on the Output node. It will be the last node in your graph. All the things you see in game will come out of this node. Now we change the blend of this material to translucent. That way, we can have a material that doesn't block visuals behind it. Note how this also removes some of the possible inputs from this node. The three we're going to use are the base color, emissive color, and opacity. The base color is the core color of the node. I'm going to right-click, create a vector3 parameter, pick a color I like, and make it completely opaque. Then I am going to drag the output of the parameter I've created to the input of the base color. The emissive color of a node is the light it generates. Even in the dark, emissive colors will shine out a little. They tend to make your map look a little brighter. I'm going to copy this color, Control-C and Control-V, and connect an identical node to the emissive color. The opacity is how much light gets through the material. To set the opacity, you want a scalar, or number, value between 0 and 1. I've set mine to 0.5, which as I can see in the previous video looks pretty transparent. That's it. With these steps, you can create a basic translucent material for your waiting area. Players will be able to see the battlefield while waiting for the game to start, adding an extra level of anticipation to the game. Now that we have the material ready, we can apply it to a large block under our entry area and barriers on the sides to prevent players from falling off. This area will serve as a waiting area where people can look down on the battlefield as well as arm themselves for whatever's coming. So after that, we designed the landscape. I didn't want the waiting area to be just a flat, clear piece of ground. So I put a landscape on top of it. I deleted some of the center squares so that you could see through the landscape and through the glassy floor to the battlefield below. And then I added some weapons. I provided free weapons and created a whole bunch of vending machine where players could buy weapons, consumables, ammo for heavy weapons, things like that. They were found in the devices and weapons folders. I put weapons and items on the ground using item spawners, so there will be plenty for everybody to pick on up. And then I created some layouts. So the cool thing about UEFN is that instead of creating individual vending machines and editing their properties, you can just copy a whole row of vending machines, paste it and rotate it and move it to where you want, and you can have a square of vending machines that all look pretty nice. It's all set up very quickly and easily in comparison to doing this with Snap or without Snap in Creative 1.0. And Then I created some billboards above the vending machines to label what the different zones were of the shop, essentially. And and there we go. Now you could create custom labels in Photoshop or Inkscape or Illustrator if you wanted, but I just went with what I could do with the billboards here. So far, our map is shaping up nicely. The attention to detail and care in design should lead to a compelling Fortnite Creative experience for players. Let's keep going with one more little bit of functionality. We're going to add a coin grant every 30 seconds. It's pretty easy given the code we already have. We just need to get an agent for every player and send them coins. So we'll go through that code here. Remember our input logic output diagram from earlier? We just change our input and logic here. We want our input to be a clock that fires every 60 seconds and our logic to be every player. The output is the same, so let's look at what the code is like. This code is a little more complicated, but broken into small pieces still. It has an item granter device in and timer device in, and it subscribes to the timer device, and on the success of the timer, it calls timer device finish. The timer device finish function resets and restarts the timer device, then calls grant coins to all players. Grant coins to all players gets a handle for all the players in the game, then grants coins to each of them. Don't understand all this? That's absolutely fine. You can simply create a verse device with the name timed granter device, copy the code from the GitHub link on the screen and in the description, and paste it into VS Code. One way to learn to code is to copy other people's code and modify it in increasing amounts. I've also created an elimination coin granter that you can use to grant coins on elimination of all players. That's in the GitHub as well. Now we're going to do some testing. If you haven't figured this out in Creative 1.0, let me be plain with you on this. Without testing, your map probably isn't worth playing. Players want polished experiences. Anyway, off we go and we get some footage along the way. Well, there's one bug. We'll just move the grind rail a little more out of the water so we can slide over the top of it, and then we'll go for it again. Find another. We've found a bug. This looks really weird. I eliminated this guard and then I was reloading and it took all my items away. I don't really know how to do that intentionally, so I'm just going to sit on it, browse some forums, do some Googling, walk away from the computer for a while, go back over it. Apparently because it makes absolutely zero sense. So give me a second. And I'm back. I was eventually thinking that maybe the kill was what caused the item clear. So I dug into the item granters here and wow, look. Reloading isn't what cleared my inventory. Giving the current player coins was. It cleared his inventory on the item grant. So I changed that variable and my stress level drops back to normal. I wouldn't call this a publishable map yet, but I think it'll be publishable soon. So we'll check out how to do that now. First, become an island creator. For this, you need to have an appropriate bank account, essentially. If you're under 18, it gets complicated. I won't cover that in this video. But once you get in the island creator program, you need to publish to a private island. This little option here, then start a testing session. After you get your testing session running, you need to stop the game and get into edit mode again. Now, click on this option here and do a memory calculation. A memory calculation compares the amount of memory you are using in your map to the total maximum memory allowed for a Fortnite island. If you exceed it, you're going to need to remove probably one class of devices from your map if you can. You should see this memory calculation success screen. Then go to the creator page and find the island in your list of projects. Fill all this stuff out and publish. Everyone can now play your island. I recommend you start unlisted and find a bunch of friends to play your island and help bugs first. But there you go. You've got an island made with UEFN published. So some wrap up. My personal goal in building mechanics is to use devices for exactly what they're designed for and to write code to combine them as efficiently as possible. This means that if you have experience with Creative 1.0, you will be able to build functionality quickly and efficiently by using devices to their fullest. What you should try to avoid doing is something repeatedly. Hundreds of triggers, for example, is something to try and avoid. There are still places where it's necessary, but that will change as coding in UEFN becomes more powerful. I've hoped you've learned something here, and if you could like and subscribe, it would help me out. I want to share a lot more tools for making your work in UEFN easier.